And our final speaker in this session before we open it up to the floor and to discussion is Wayman Bennett, who's the Joint National Secretary of Unite Against Fascism.
Before I get onto fascism, I want to share with you something. I live near Tottenham, and I was invited to a report that came out several days ago about the riots, about who was to blame. And they identified two elements who were to blame. They identified schools, and they identified social workers. So I thought that since we had experienced this riot, I'd come and explain what they said was the problem. And they said they thought that the social workers in the schools were not engaging in the social problems of the people that they were helping, that rather they were imposing their ideas on the people instead of listening to what the problem was. If you notice, what was missing there was the fact there was no problem with the government that had lost touch with what was going on, had cut EMA, had cut pensions, had made people homeless. There was no question of looking at that. And even in Tottenham, actually, the fact that they'd shot a black man dead on the street and pretended it didn't happen. They pretended there was a shootout that didn't happen. That wasn't in the report. And so therefore, I think there's things missing from the report. But what they said is they identified 20,000 problem families, in which they said they thought that social workers ought to deal with. And really, my starting point about when we look at fascism and racism is to say that it doesn't come out of a vacuum. It's not an accident. When I was growing up in the 1970s, when the first crisis hit after that, when, I know people are old enough to remember oil shocks and stuff like that, I remember the growth of the National Front. But it was simpler to identify the National Front. They had a skinhead, they had boots, and they were chasing after you. And you didn't have to question what was going on. You knew that they were fascist, and they were supporting openly the politics of Adolf Hitler. But when you listen today, when you listen to the media, the discussion about what's going on, actually it's far more confused. I'll give you an example. I'm part of a group of people I supported the adoption process in terms of looking into racism, in terms of whatever it is. And again, the question of social workers came up about matching. And social workers were asked, what do you think's a problem? They said, well, we have to make sure there isn't racism in families when we're matching people. They didn't say that they started off with the colour of the skin or anything like that. They said they wanted to make sure there wasn't racism that was taking place. Guess what they call that? Political correctness. It's getting in the way of the process of adoption. And people said, we're professionals, we're trying to make sure it works for both the family and the child. Actually, I think, and it came straight to me that what was going on. They want to shorten adoption because they're worried about the cost of it. So when you think about, instead of saying, well, the child is central to what we're doing, what they're doing is they're making cuts in people's lives in order to speed up that process. That's what's going on. And the reason why I say that, I said the way the crisis affects people, most of us respond to crisis the same way. When they say we're going to work until we're 70, we get angry and despondent. When they say they're going to give our schools over to some, we get angry and despondent. Some people actually get hit to the point where I think they look to far-right parties. And you can see this. I think that social work is going to be the front line of the fight against fascism and racism. Why do I say that? In Barking and Dagenham, Nick Griffin was organising there, and he lost his seat. And I'm glad that he lost his seat. But when you went into different places where social workers or care workers were, they put up a simple sign. They didn't say stop the fascists, whatever it is. They said we don't accept discrimination in this office. And I want to see more of those signs and more people confident to defend that and say why they defend it. I'll tell you why we should defend it. Is to talk about around here in Liverpool. A year ago, the building down there, which is the Unite office, was attacked by fascists. Now, the reason why that's important is because the people that attacked it were in the EDL. And at the moment, the EDL, we're told, is, according to the government's Home Office, is a human rights organisation. And the reason why that's important is because any of us who've been opposing them, we get called all kinds of names. You want trouble. Every time we call a counter-demonstration, there have been 77 counter-demonstrations against the EDL. And there's been a problem. They've been marched into the centre of multiracial societies, and we're told that a small group of fascists have the right to determine what's going on. People say, what about their right to disrupt your life, chase you down the street, and burn down mosques? What about their right to be able to do this? And we say we want to oppose them. And I think part of the question of where we are on the far right is to understand what's happened since the 70s and the 90s. In some senses, they've got a two-pronged strategy. you have the EDL, you have the BNP, and you also have bits in the middle, and really what you're having is an electoral strategy sometimes, and also a street strategy. But this is also, they're partly being helped by some of the ideological arguments that are taking place. We're told that multiculturalism has failed. Now, I don't know where, when I look inside this room and I look around and think, where has it failed? Maybe it failed in Eton, where the majority of our esteemed leadership came from. Maybe they don't understand what multiculturalism is. It means actually living together and sharing different cultures. It hasn't failed. It actually works. And in Britain, actually, I think it's been a bit of a success story. I was sent to Oslo after Breivik. Breivik went on his murderous rampage inside Oslo. And it's important that he started off by being Islamophobic. But who did he kill? He attacked the Labour Party Children's Conference. And we should understand that tells us about fascism. It's not true that it's just a set of ideas. It's a murderous set of ideas. And I want to pay tribute to our honorary president, which is Doreen Lawrence, in terms of her stand against both institutional racism and also against the National Front and the BNP. Because where Stephen was murdered, one bit's missing from when we gave them thing for the Macpherson inquiry was the fact that the shop, the BNP shop, was there. And it was organising young children at that time to organise around them. You know the people that opposed them? They were teachers and social workers opposing those young people being influenced by those ideas. But do you know what they were told? Political correctness. In fact, the teachers were called spies in the classroom, looking at what young people were saying. Actually, to be honest, we want more of that activity when we see it and identify it and say that it's a problem. And we should defend ourselves from the point that actually we've made our society a better place. And we've done it from two ways. One, we've made sure inside those institutions we've challenged racism, and where you've seen BNP or EDL members, they've been opposed. Why is this so important? In Stoke, where BNP members have been elected onto the council, they've sat on the social work committee. And they've sat on the social work committee. Do you know what they're worried about? They said there's not been enough adoptions, mixed race adoptions. Now, they want to kill people, really. And normally they say, when they're asked, would you let your daughter marry somebody that's... No, no, no. But what we want to do is to make sure there's more mixed race adoptions. Really, what they want to do is they're attacking the idea of the whole framework that's been set out there. And that's far more insidious, more normally, than what you'd expect. In other words, they don't come out openly and say that they're racist and fascist. They hide it. And in fact, a lot of the media go along with it. I'm asked all the time. They say they're not... They say we're just Islamophobic, we're not racist and fascist, we allow that. And I said, if somebody went into your house and burgled it, yeah, would you say they were a burglar or they're a reallocation agent? Right? You say they're a burglar. And what's happening is that the language that's been used is hiding what's going on. And Islamophobia is leading. Islamophobia has been used to push forward racism, and it's also to help fascists begin to organise. What do I mean by that? I mean that when we've seen the increase of 1,200 Islamophobic attacks, what's actually followed that? I think the level of intolerance has increased. If you look at Dale Farm, the attack on people in Dale Farm, what happens is when you let one racism or one discrimination grow, actually others, older forms begin to grow. People have heard the ramblings of David Starkey. I don't know if people heard him in the riots. He said that black people sounded like white people and white people sounded like black people. What's the problem? Right? As long as they don't sound like you, Starkey, in terms of saying you're bigotry, then... But what we have got is we had 1 million people vote for the fascists inside this country. It's not manifested itself as deeply as I think inside the 1970s, but we have got a serious problem. And I'll tell you why we've got a serious problem. I went to Hungary. And in Hungary, you've got an organisation called Jobbik, and it's got thousands of members. Even the EDL in this country, they actually recruited 54,000 members. They were never able to manifest themselves into an exact place where they were able to march because we opposed them. In all the 77 demonstrations, when we've opposed them, there's been, we've actually faced problems in terms of the way that people are treated. In fact, in Bolton, where I am a respectable person, but I was arrested in Bolton. The policeman said I was talking too much on the megaphone. But what they also did is they went round to people with their children on that demonstration and said, we're going to take your children off of you if you carry on coming on to this if you carry on coming onto this demonstration. And I think it's important to stop fascism in its tracks early on. I don't know if people have heard of Marine Le Pen standing in France. Her organisation claims 15,000 members. Wouldn't it have been better if that organisation had actually been stopped earlier? Why is Nicolas Sarkozy talking about halal meat in the election? And by the way, while he's talking about halal meat, he's now starting to talk about kosher meat, saying that both of them should be banned. The last time that happened, by the way, was under the Vichy government. So really what we're seeing is it opens up the door for bigotry. And I'm in two minds. One, I'm in the mind of saying we've been successful. As a partly successful. It was good to see Nick Griffin crying in Barking and Dagenham after he was actually pushed out. It was good to see them in that situation. It's good to see that. There's still an MEP in this area, by the way. Nick Griffin is still an elected MEP in this area. And there's still too many fascists active and organising. And they're waiting for the crisis to bite in a deeper way. And that's what Unite Against Fascism is about. It's about bringing people together. I was asked on Radio 4, what's the most proud... They said I was talking down Britain, yeah, because I was complaining about schools, racism, unemployment, all those kinds of... Stop talking down Britain. Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Controller. And then I turned around and they said, what are you proud of? I said, I'm proud of the anti-racist multicultural tradition inside this country. And who built it? I'll tell you how it's built. It was built because Le Pen came to this country and called his organisation the Front National after the British National Front. But we smashed the British National Front. The BNP tried to organise, and when we look at the murder of Stephen Lawrence, we shouldn't forget there were 6 racist murders organised around that bookshop. And we marched on that bookshop. They forgot to put that in the Macpherson inquiry, but we tried to put that right. And in this country, people have marched from Cable Street all the way through to stop the growth of the far right. And actually, to be honest, it hasn't been our leaders that have done that. Actually, most of the time, they've benefited from the fact that fascists haven't been able to do that. We've stopped them from being able to organise on the streets. But we've also stopped them somewhere else. We've stopped them. If you look at any cultural history, I don't know if people have been watching this programme called White Heat. You see people wearing anti-racist badges. You see people talking about the different carnivals that took place. There's been a tradition of bonding people together in struggle. I'm not talking about where people don't respect each other. I'm saying there's been a struggle in order to make sure that that's actually put back. And that's something which we should defend. They're saying that teachers, social workers spend too much time thinking about these issues. I think those things have actually contributed to a better place to live. Now, that doesn't mean I'm a nationalist. I'm saying I'd like to export that. That's something that I'm proud of. I grew up in East London, and I'm told I should be proud of the Olympics. Actually, what I'm really proud of is the fact we smashed the National Front. Every time when EDL came to march in Tower Hamlets, we stopped them from being able to march. And we're going to have to do more of that. But I think the ideological front is opening up more and more over the question of Islamophobia and the growth of racism. That's the reason why I'm asking you on the 14th of April and the 22nd of April, we're doing a day of action against the EDL. One of the reasons why the EDL and the BNP are being broken is because people on the ground are putting out leaflets explaining and exposing who these people are. And I'd like people to join us on that day. I'm also going to give some serious warnings, actually. In a place called Greece, there's a new organisation called New Dawn. They didn't have a large fascist organisation, but they do have now. And in fact, it was taken into government. I think as the crisis begins to bite, actually you start to see the growth of these organisations. And also there's a misrepresentation of what these organisations are about. People say that they're just made up of what they describe as working class people. Actually, the core of, in Britain, there's a new organisation formed from a man called Paul, from UKIP, the BNP and EDL, called the British Freedom Party. It's got nothing to do with freedom and everything to do with fascism. And they're attempting to launch off the back of the crisis that's taking place now. And I think it's very important that we're active to make sure that they don't get into a position of being able to influence people. And I'll give an example of what I mean by that, if I can find it, just to end up on. I can find it in my notes. 2 years ago, they recruited a young man. His name was Simon Beach. He became a member of the English Defence League and the British National Party, and together with Gareth Foster, they've just been jailed for 10 years. because they tried to blow up a mosque in Stoke. They ran a gas pipe into the mosque, and they tried to blow it up. But unfortunately, they weren't able to do that. It doesn't sound very good. He was an actually munitions expert in the British Army. It's not very good, actually. But nevertheless, I'm glad that he was stopped, right? But the point of it is that he was recruited from school and around things, and we have to make sure that process stops. And that's the reason why we need vigilance, organisation, and being able to stop that. And I'd like to urge people, it's good that we're in a position where I'm saying it doesn't feel like it did in the late 70s and the late 80s, but that can change very, very quickly. An organisation can be intimidated. That's why I point to the News from Norway, which was having a gay and lesbian book opening, and that was attacked by the EDL. So the truth is, these people pretend that they're not fascist. They pretend that they're not violent. They pretend they're not trying to put those positions, but they do. And I'll also end on the warning about, I think that David Cameron played a very dangerous game when the EDL marched in Luton. They had a very bad demo. The only thing that saved them was that he made a speech in Munich, of all places, saying that multiculturalism doesn't work. And it's a dovetailing of these two things together that we have to help actually overcome and combat. And I think that we can do that if we can bring together all those different groups of people that are attacked by the fascists. It's a mixed story. It's a story of success, it's a story of defiance, and it's a story that we need to continue this fight to make sure that these menaces, these people trying to divide and attack us, are stopped and pushed back into the gutter where they belong.